Just four teams remain in the hunt for hockey's holiest grail, the Stanley Cup. Sadly, your Vancouver Canucks are not one of them, having lost in Game 7 to the Edmonton Oilers last Monday night. But winning the Stanley Cup is only the beginning. According to the author of a new book, it is the offseason that provides the most satisfying moment for each member of the winning team. Here to talk about my day with the Cup, NHL players tell their stories about hometown celebrations with hockey's greatest trophy is broadcaster and author Jim Lang. Welcome, Jim.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
First of all, a simple question. What inspired you to write this book?
In the spring of 2021, the concept was brought forward to me, and we did some research to make sure there wasn't duplicate books, because sometimes people have a good idea and go, "Oh, hey, John Ackerman wrote that," and so we have to make sure that that didn't happen. And with the more research we did, there was nothing similar to it, and I got excited, like, well, what do they do when they have their day with the Cup? It's more than just drinking some beer out of it. There's a lot more to it. So the more we researched it, the more people we spoke to, the more excited we got about putting it together.
Now, the writing of this book took some doing. You started it in 2021, ended up talking to, I believe, 30 players and coaches during the summers of 2021, 22, and 23. And I guess it's because it's next to impossible to talk to these guys during the regular season.
It's 100% true, John. It's just once mid-September rolls around and they get really busy with preseason and training camp, they're unavailable to May. So it was a May to September window for all of them, even a lot of the retired players. If they're not doing coaching, they're doing alumni work or they have their own businesses. So you're basically getting them on off-season, vacation time, training time, and grabbing them whenever you can to build the foundation for the book.
Now, the Stanley Cup, as students of the game will know, has been around since 1893, has been the NHL's top trophy since 1926. Yet the tradition of each member of the championship team spending a day with the Cup is a relatively recent one, dating back to 1995 when the New Jersey Devils won their first Cup. What sparked that change?
We'll have to give a little bit of credit to Gary Bettman. And I know a lot of people listening like Gary Bettman, but no, Gary Bettman the year before, the Rangers finally win the Cup after their long drought. Sorry, Vancouver Canucks fans. So they went a little crazy in Manhattan with the Cup, but it was a little unsupervised at times. And Gary Bettman and the NHL and the Hockey Hall of Fame decided, let's do something proper. Let's have a curator from the Hall of Fame, Phil Pritchard and his staff, a keeper of the Cup, bring the Cup to John Ackerman, to Jim Lang, to whomever, and let them have their day with the Cup. But then we'll watch it, make sure it's safe, put it in the road case, and take it to the next player. And that's how it all started in the summer of 1995 after the Devils won.
Now, one of the interesting facts to emerge from reading this book is the fact that there's not just one Stanley Cup, not two, but three of them. Why is that?
The main one never leaves the enclosed glass case in the hall for protection, for preservation, to make sure that that's always pristine. The second one they call the presentation cup, and that's the one you see brought out onto the ice, whether it's Joe Sakic or you name your favorite player, and he grabs the cup. And then they have a backup because the cup not only is doing stuff with the NHL, it's going to maybe a Canadian Forces base, it's going to a hospital, it's going on a hockey goodwill tour. It was in Australia for the NHL games that were there at the beginning of the season. So it travels a lot. And sometimes they need an extra cup because it can't be in two places at once. So that's why they have almost a backup to the presentation cup.
Now, the star of the book, besides the Stanley Cup itself, of course, are the so-called keepers of the cup, led by folks like Mike Bolt. What is his job exactly?
Well, Phil Pritchard oversees them, and there's Walt Newbrand and Mike Bolt and a crew of them, John. And basically, they divvy it up. So if you can imagine, say you would be one of the keepers, and you would get the Vancouver, Seattle, Northern California swing, and then I would get the Edmonton, Regina, Winnipeg swing. And so they realize early on that you can't have one person take the cup to all the players and coaches by themselves for summer. It's too much for one person to do. So they go there. They usually will say, hey, John, we're going to be at your house at about 7:15 in the morning, and you're going to have it all day. And they like to have a bit of an itinerary so they know where it's going to go. It's going to have personal family time, maybe time at a hospital or a charity event for a local minor hockey association. And then it does some other appearances at a restaurant, and usually almost all of them, it's a private party in the evening where the players by rule have to hold the cup as people are drinking out of it. And at about 11:30 at night, they say, John, you got 30 minutes with the cup. John, you got 15 minutes. And at midnight, they pack it up. They tell the player or the coach, you have to say goodbye to the cup. And sometimes that could be emotional because they never know if they're ever going to see it again like that. It's put in the road case and it goes to the next city. And so over the years, they've really refined the logistics of traveling with the cup. And because there are players in Scandinavia, in Eastern and Central Europe, throughout North America, they try to do it geographically so it's just not too overwhelming for the keeper. So you might have the Finland-Sweden swing, take a few days break, then go down to Czechia and Slovakia, then take, say, 4 or 5 days break, fly it back to North America, someone else takes over, and they're doing, Massachusetts, Michigan, and Minnesota swing in the United States. So that kind of thing.
Now, over the years, people have eaten Jell-O, spaghetti and meatballs, poutine, lobster bisque, sushi, ice cream sundaes, and all manner of cereals from the cup. What to you is the strangest thing ever consumed from or done with the Stanley Cup?
Well, it's been in a couple swimming pools by accident, John, not by, it wasn't meant to be. I mean, I don't think it's anything too unusual, to be honest with you, John. I mean, a lot of players put Lucky Charms or Fruit Loops or Honey Nut Cheerios in the cup for either they ate it as a kid or for their young kids to eat. I know Darcy Kemper, when he had it with the Colorado Avalanche in 2022, his grandmother made traditional Saskatchewan pierogies with sour cream. And the keeper kind of looked, but they kept it. They put the pierogies in a bowl, then that in the bowl in the cup, because it just makes it less to clean up before they put something else in it. So basically, whatever your imagination can come up with, people have either drank out of it or eaten out of the cup, and just to say, hey, I had this dish. It was my favorite dish growing up. And I know for Nicholas Haig, that at one time his mom used to make like this Frank's Red Hot chicken wing dip when he was a kid. And so they put it in a bowl to put it in the cup to eat their nachos and chips out of the chicken wing dip. But they put it in the bowl within the bowl because then they have to drink out of it later. So it's less to clean up afterwards, if you know what I mean.
You touched upon this earlier, but spending a day with the Stanley Cup is an emotional moment for a player. And you observe that some talk about how their wedding wasn't as big a deal as their day with the cup. Certainly the planning of the day with the cup, a lot more goes into that than merely walking down the aisle.
And it's so true. And some of the wives would look at their NHL playing husband like, how could you say that? And he said, honey, I have not been dreaming of being married since I'm 5 years old, but I've been dreaming about the Stanley Cup since I'm 5 or 6 years old. So that's where it's a little different. And that's something that I know for Ken Danico, he would take a garbage can growing up in suburban Edmonton, Alberta, and put it over his head, pretending it's the cup. And a lot of Canadian kids have done that, would pretend they have the cup over their head, or they're playing road hockey in their cul-de-sac and they're playing for the Stanley Cup. And for a lot of the players, they said the only time they've seen their dad or their grandfather or maybe their favorite uncle, closest uncle to them, cry was when the road case is unpacked and that Stanley Cup is put on the kitchen counter or the dining room table, and everyone can look at it, and it's right there in front of them. And for a lot of them, they're not just thinking about their son's name being on it, but the fact that their idols, Guy Lafleur, Bobby Orr, Wayne Gretzky, those names are on the trophy, and they can see them and touch them.
What do you think all these stories collected in the book have in common?
They all have in common. I'll tell you a couple of things they have in common. Talking to all the people, they all called it the Stanley Cup or the Cup. They never referred to it as I was with it. I was with the Cup. I was with the Stanley Cup. They all have a special reverence for it, a respect for it, because they know how hard it is to win, and they have some friends that they played with in the league who played a long time and had very successful careers and never won it. And so that's why they realize just how special it is, the club that they're on. And they all say the same thing about the ability to, it's almost some ways, especially guys or a lot of people, how do you say I love you to your family? This is the ultimate way to say I love you and thank you is, here's the Stanley Cup. I want you to share it because I couldn't have done it without you. You eat out of it, you drink out of it, take photos with it because it's your day as much as it's my day. And they all say the same thing. That was their ultimate way to thank their family and their friends for all the support over the years, because they couldn't have done it without all that support. Whether it's their Pee Wee, U12 hockey power skating coach, to their grandmother making their favorite snack, to their dad being there when they were down, you name it, the support of their wife and kids, it all plays a role in them becoming a Stanley Cup champion.
We may be biased as both Canadians and hockey fans, but there really isn't a trophy quite like the Stanley Cup in all of pro sports, is there?
There isn't, John, and I try to explain that to everyone, that of all, I mean, there are great trophies in all sports, amateur and professional, but your name's not inscribed on it, and you don't share it with small town communities around the world, and you don't eat and drink out of it, and the special unwritten rules that unless you've won the cup and your name's on it, you don't touch it, you don't drink out of it, you're not allowed near it. And that's, they all adhere to that, all past and present players, John. And it's something very, very special. And they take it to hospital rooms with a dying relative, to children's hospital, to help kids feel better. They say that cup shows up and they smile, and the parents say, I haven't seen my daughter smile in a month, but the cup showed up and they smiled. I don't know what it is. The more I talk to the people involved, the more I realize that and they realize it. They said, when the night you win the cup, it's so overwhelming. You're so physically and mentally exhausted from 4 7-game playoff series. And then you have the parades. But when the cup shows up at your house and you see the reaction, they all say, it hit them. I'm a Stanley Cup champion. And they did something new last year, John. They started inscribing the names before the cup tour, so that when you got to the player's house, the names were on it. And we were at Nicholas Haig's house in Kitchener at the end of August of last year. And his grandmother's 99. She's wheelchair bound, and her little fingers dragging across the cup, and said, why is my name on the trophy? And said, Grandma, it's our name. It's always going to be on there. And you could see the parents got tears in their eyes. And, that's beyond it. And sometimes we get tied up, John, in contracts and business is sports, but this is why they play and why they sacrifice. They won a Stanley Cup, and because it's such a special trophy, their name is on it, their family name, and they're sharing it with the people they love. And there's no other trophy that does that.
What do you hope folks, readers, take away from the book?
I hope they realize that hockey players are human beings, and sometimes we forget that. We talk about them in social media, and we complain that they didn't make the save or they didn't score the goal, and they're not robots. They're humans, and they came from the same communities that we all did, and they just had a special gift, and they worked at it, and they were able to put it all together and be part of something special and become a Stanley Cup champion. But all of them, from Hall of Fame legends to role players to the future Hall of Famers like Sidney Crosby, they talk about the respect they have for the trophy and just how much it meant for them to share it with their family. And all they talk about, especially the current players still playing, is how hard they work in the off season when they don't feel like it, thinking, I want to do that again. I want to have that experience again. And that drives them. And, they get up some days and they're not feeling it, and they're sore and they're tired and they're mentally wiped out. They're like, I got to go to the gym. I got to skate again because I want to be better next year to hopefully help my team win a Stanley Cup so I can have this experience again.
The name of the book is My Day with the Cup. NHL players tell their stories about hometown celebrations with hockey's greatest trophy. It's published by Simon & Schuster Canada. My thanks to broadcaster and author Jim Lang.
John, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.